We're back for one more episode of Hill Climb Diaries. I'm joined by Jack and Joe, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different this week. It's going to be a look back at the last 2 months of racing, what's worked, what hasn't worked, the highs, the lows, and yeah, just a general chat.
And that included the questions from you guys that you asked us in last week's episode of Hill Climb Diaries. That's episode 9. I think the question that was asked the most was, what times did we do? What positions did we come in? So Jack, we'll start with you.
So for the Nationals, I was never going to put in a ridiculous time, but I actually did pretty good considering the circumstances for me. I did 3:22, which is obviously miles off the mark of these boys, and about, a minute 10, 15 slower than someone like Andrew Feather. But given I was pushing that completely inappropriate, almost unusable gear, and I've done no training, I was pretty pleased, to be honest.
So you finished about mid-pack. It was 154th on the CTT website. For me, I finished 69th, that was 2:50.6, so I'm very happy with that. It was 10 seconds off the PB from the recce ride. And Joe?
I was 28th in 2:34.4. Again, yeah, pretty happy with that. The level is very high this year. There's a lot of incredibly strong riders in all the categories, so yeah, very pleased.
In that mid-pack, 10 seconds is about 30 places, so it's quite ridiculous how tight it is.
Yeah, and I think we all thought on the day it's just nice to be able to feel like you did the best you could with the training and time you had available. I think we all felt like we got everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quiet up until my start.
So you got held up basically?
Yeah, oh man, I'm so annoyed. But
never mind.
It is what it is.
Unlucky, yeah.
So obviously we've perfected bodies and bikes throughout the season, and on the day, the big day, how do you think it performed for you, Joe?
My bike performed excellently. I had no excuses. I had a Trekomonda this year, Project 1, size 58. I talked about it in a previous video. I eventually got it down to 5.16 kilos or something like that, so incredibly light for a geared bike. Particular highlight had to be a very late addition was the Schmolke bars that I put on. I only rode those for the national championships, but they were 148 grams for a set of handlebars, and I didn't have to cut them down. They were really cool. They felt very stiff compared to all the other bars I've ridden. They're just quite expensive. They are €495, so yeah. Your bike, you rode the Fixer this year. I had to hassle Jack in the weeks leading up to the Nationals because he's a bit lazy with sorting out his bike or getting anything ready, and he was going to ride a 42-20.
Yep.
But eventually we bullied him on the final week to put it on, and I think you were quite glad that you had the 22 tooth cog on, weren't you?
Yes, I could barely push the 22 up, and then I was speaking to everyone in the run-up, and far stronger, far more capable riders were pushing gears about 5 teeth smaller than mine. So yeah, big mistake on the day, but thank goodness Joe and Reuben hassled me on the run-up to it.
I think it kind of forced you to go quite deep, and you were a real state at the top, weren't you? So I think you felt like you got it all out.
Yeah, I called my mum the day after, and I described it as an out-of-body experience. It was surreal being in that much that lactic hell, but an unforgettable one. Riding through that crowd is unbelievable, and it really does just give you those extra watts, like you said.
And Reuben, you had your Riley.
Yeah, so nice semi-custom carbon frame from company down in Brighton, but I had the good experience of my bike actually went faster than me up the climb at the Nationals because Tom Bell rode my bike, so it was wicked to see someone who's actually placed very well ride the bike. But I managed to, in the last week, get the bike down to 5.14, so 20 grams lighter than Joe's, but still massive difference in weight. But it's about stiff as anything. You're never going to need a stiffer bike than that.
Yeah, I had a little go on Reuben's bike, although it's totally the wrong size for me. And compared to my Monda, which is a 58, and obviously everything's a bit kind of bigger and further apart, yours felt a lot more direct. And I think that's just down to the fact that it's much smaller. Yeah, and a few less carbon parts in it as well, which I think, a bit more alloy cranks.
So we'll see you on a 52 next year with a 160mm stem for maximum stiffness.
Well, me and Joe are sort of knocking out interval sessions. Jack's employed the full recovery mode hill climb training program that he's perfected over many years.
That's a really good gap, full recovery, I like that.
We had quite a few questions about the training that we did. For me and Reuben, that was some very difficult training from Tom Bell. For Jack, that was more maximum recovering training, the Jack style of training. Both worked
in their own merits. I think one of the things I've wanted to say, despite my, my jovial approach to the whole thing, is that, last year I did it a bit more seriously. I really enjoyed it. I did some better times. But I should say equally that this year, despite having done no training, I had a wicked time. It's such an accessible way to do racing, and regardless of whether you're at peak form or definitely not peak form, it's still such a fun weekend. And the efforts themselves, I think Tom Bell said once, they feel like a training effort anyway.
Why don't you want to get better?
Because it's a lost cause.
Just to be clear, Jack, some weeks you just ride to and from work, which is you do about 16 minutes riding a day.
Yep.
And then no other riding, and then race on the weekend, and you still had a great time, didn't you? And felt part of the event, and no one's kind of thinking you're rubbish or anything like that for finishing lower down the order. It's a very inclusive, supportive style of racing.
You have to remember, these are time trials, and so you're racing against yourself. They're not mass start hill climbs, which would be fun but absolute chaos.
Reuben, it's the first time you kind of followed a proper training plan from Tom. It was a training plan he kind of set for me, but you do the same training as me. We do all our riding together. How do you find doing a more structured approach to your training?
I think it's really good. It really worked, and it takes a bit more mental motivation to go out and be like, oh, I've got to do 6 times 6 minutes at just over threshold. But then again, if you stick to it, I really noticed the difference. My power went up. I think we both got pretty close to season PBs in that last week or 2 weeks, so it obviously worked.
We had a couple of questions asking about kind of how much our power went up throughout the kind of 8 weeks that we were sort of training for the hill climb season. For my 5-minute power, I think at the start of the season it was around 410, 409, and then by the end I did 433 for 5 minutes, 433 watts, and I'd lost weight by then, so it's 62 kilos, and yeah, very happy with that. Same for around a minute. It started at about 620 watts, and by the end of the season I did 654 for a minute. Same for Bank Road. You had a massive 2-minute power PB there.
So yeah, Bank Road was probably the best result of the year for me. It was over 600 watts for 2 minutes, and I think probably one of the last times I did over 600 watts for 2 minutes was BikeCC about 4 years ago, where I weighed about 13 kilos more.
Yeah, it did us both a lot of good, and we've both been sort of training and racing for a long time, so to see improvements after riding for so long was good. Yeah, very happy with it.
So we've had Rich Mitch ask whether you think that, obviously you do pretty structured training, but he's asking whether, crits or some kind of road racing, do you think that could be applied to your training plan? Would we ever see you race a crit again?
Not during hill climb season, because I wouldn't want to crash. In the lead up to hill climb season, maybe around July and August, a bit of road racing could help.
I think there's no harm in it. Just wouldn't want to crash, because that would be disastrous. But yeah, Rich actually goes on to ask, does that mean for someone with a young family and limited time, hill climb season is the perfect race season? And I think it is, because training sessions, our rides never went over 2 hours. That was the longest training session we did, and maybe that was once a week, twice a week. So you could definitely pack in a good hour of riding if you've got a suitable hill nearby. So yeah, hill climb season is great for a time crunch cyclist that wants to race and ride hard.
Yeah, for all my excuses, I could probably have made more time, and I could easily have got more involved with it. So yeah, I would echo that sentiment.
Obviously during hill climb season, you get pretty focused on your diet because you're trying to lose as much weight as possible. Beige Master 86 wanted to know, because Reuben went vegan, how much weight did you lose going vegan, and did you feel like you lost any power?
So I think in the 3 months I went vegan, I lost close to 6 kilos. And with Tom Bell's structured training, my power went up, and that's the absolute golden ratio. As your weight comes down, your power goes up. Redemption for last week. We've had a bunch of other comments. Eric Cullen, how much weight did you lose? Christopher Ashton, have you found the vegan diet? And generally, I found it not that bad. It was a lot easier than I was expecting. Compared to last year, I definitely wasn't in that food misery bin.
Really?
Yeah, not this year, so.
The other benefit, of course, is for your Instagram account. It's just something else to talk about, so you've attracted that new audience, and that alone is worth it.
Yeah. So overall, I'd definitely do it again. Actually, compared to the last week where I've probably put that weight back on, I'm definitely going to be going back to it because I found just a good way to cut weight.
But I guess we're not saying that that's the only way to cut weight, because
No.
I'm definitely not vegan, mostly vegetarian, but I'll have a bit of meat sometimes. And I was able to, I lose weight as well. So we're not saying it's the only way. And for Jack, he lives on I live with Jack, so I know his diet very well. And he lives on a sort of a diet that revolves around cheese, butter, oil,
Lots
eggs.
of oil, garlic. It's a very indulgent vegetarian diet, and it's never going to change. Maybe.
very rich.
Very rich. And if I really wanted to take it seriously, I would probably do it. I'd go vegan for next year, if I was absolutely committed.
You've heard it here first.
You do a lot of racing during hill climb season. I think I did 16 this year. But what was your favourite of the year?
Probably VC Walcott. It's an amazing crowd. It's quite similar to the Nationals in a way, as you get funneled through this little bit at the end, and it's this horrible flat out sprint for the last, 30 seconds or so. And it's amazing. It's such a good event, and it was the first one of the year. I felt like I got it all out in pieces at the end. So yeah, that was a wicked one.
That's a 2-minute effort, isn't it, for the win? So that's a very short one. Reuben?
I'd say probably Monsal, just because it's such an iconic, short, horrible climb. And yeah, it really got me actually buzzing for next year already. I think we all enjoyed the Widdicombe-Haytor doubleheader.
Did we? Did we?
And what about you?
My favourite was the Devon doubleheader, which goes up Haytor in the morning. That's a long one, around 12 minutes for the course record. We do a couple of minutes longer than that. And then there's a really steep, fairly long one at about 5 minutes called Widdicombe in the afternoon. The weather's really good that day, and yeah, we all had a good time. And there's rumours that one of those climbs might be the Nationals next year, could be a long one next year. So someone that seems to be getting better at the longer ones, I'm looking forward to that.
And obviously, there's lots of highlights in the season. We do lots of good racing. None of them are bad races, but what do you think was the worst in terms of performance, or you struggled on the day? What do you think was the hardest?
I think one of the hardest mentally was actually Reading, but it was such horrible weather. I think in the dry it'd be much better, or I'd enjoy it more. But yeah, that was the most challenging one for me, I think.
It's good, eh? Excellent.
Haven't been very lucky with the weather, have we?
Me, it was the Bath one. I was really looking forward to that one, but it was wet, very wet, and I got too cold and just didn't have a very good performance there. So a great climb, but yeah, one that I didn't enjoy because of my lack of speed. And for you?
Probably the Charred Wheelers one, though it was such a nice climb and a good day out. It was very, very mellow at the bottom and then kicked up horribly towards the end. And physically, I had a sad tummy towards the top. I think that was the hardest one of the year probably for me, yeah.
Joe's going to reach out the window and touch a stranger's bum.
It's me, it's not a stranger.
Graham Unwin asks, my question is for you all. Would you, if you had a choice, keep your bikes for future seasons, or are there bikes you have ridden that you would like to choose, or are there others that you would like to try? So start with Jack.
Ooh. I said at the end I wouldn't ride a fixie next year, but I actually really like it. I like fixies generally speaking. And although the state's been good, I'd quite like to maybe get something really light, like your Fuji or something like that, and get one of those eccentric hubs. So make a kind of standard road bike into a fixie and try and make something stupidly light. That would be really fun.
Yeah, I'd like to see on a really lightweight fixie.
I think it'd just be it's such a cool feeling when you get the gear right. And yeah, I just really like the kind of simplicity of it. So yeah, we'll wait and see.
I definitely ride my Monda again. It fitted me really well. I've got quite short legs and huge, long, gangly arms and hands. They might be out of focus in the shot now. And the 58 I was riding had quite a long reach, especially with the 120mm extra light stem on. So it felt like it fitted me really well. I felt a bit more aerodynamic on it on the faster climbs. So I'd ride it again, but I suspect Trek want it back pretty soon, so I'll be sad to see it go. So I'll probably be on something different next year. Who knows what it'll be, but it'll definitely be carbon and gears for me.
And I can't really see myself riding anything unlike a Riley, just a lightweight carbon frame. I think if I did something differently, electronic gears, I think that's quite a fun thing to play around with, and you can get quite custom with those. But yeah, other than that, like, the bike's been brilliant. So it's quite difficult to know what to do for next year. But
will our viewers get to see us on the tandem next year? Will we do one on a tandem?
maybe not during hill climb season, maybe before hill climb season.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ideas are afoot around Jack's tandem for a video with it, but you'll have to wait and see.
So another question, what watts per kilo were necessary to win the Nationals? Have you experimented with different Q factor for maximum power output for your body? That's probably a question more for Joe.
Andrew Feather, who won the Nationals, this is kind of a rough estimate. He weighs around the same as me, I think around 62, 63 kilos. And I think he averaged over 600 watts for 2 minutes and 18 seconds, whatever he did. So it's either a bang on or around 10 watts per kilo for nearly 2.5 minutes to win the Nationals. So if you know your weight in kilos, let's say you weigh 80 kilos, times it by 10, and that's what you've got to do to win. So if you weigh 80 kilos, you need to be doing around 800 watts for nearly 2.5 minutes to win the Nationals. So it's basically world-class power to win. The people at the front are all amazing athletes.
And the second part of that question is about Q factor.
Normally the kind of conventional wisdom is that a narrower Q factor is better. I just kind of end up with whatever Q factor have on the crank. The only thing I do recommend if you are kind of interested in narrow your Q factor is look at your shoes, because you can narrow them on your cleats there. But yeah, I don't think about it too much. I don't think any of us do really.
I have to say, on my gravel bike, I am running the 3T Torno chain set, and that's got a very narrow, I think it's 142 Q factor, and it feels incredible. Mostly when you're seated, you're just turning over a good big gear, it feels incredible. So I think I'd love to take that onto a TT bike or something like that. But yeah, for hill climbs, I don't even think we ever talked about Q factors or the benefits of them. So we sort of had what we had.
Oh gosh, it feels like you're going nowhere.
So Ben Horben asks about your bike fit and whether it was any different to your normal setup.
For me, yes, very different. So on the Riley, very aggressive front end, much not higher saddle, but that ratio is very different to what I have on my gravel bike, an open upper, and it feels very stretched out, but not in a bad way, but it feels very aggressive.
Mine's about the same. Yeah, fairly aggressive road bike fit and feels good. Yeah, very used to it.
The Fixie's just ridiculous. It's so slammed at the front, and those TT bars really put you forward. And I was back on that Rose I rode in some earlier videos. I felt like I was on a touring bike. I felt like I was riding a sit-up in bag. So yeah, do you think, obviously you're not the most aero young man in the world, do you think you could benefit from a lower front end? Do you think that'd make a big difference for you?
I don't think it could go much slower than what I've got it set up now, and I could go lower, get more aero, but I think I'd lose a lot of power. So yeah, I feel like I've got that middle ground where I'm fairly aggressive but not too aggressive, and can still get the power out and have some vague semblance of being moderately aero maybe.
Go on, Andrew, come on!
George Jones asks, what do you eat on the morning of the hill climb, including breakfast and any pre-race nutrition? We'll start with Jack.
I moved to porridge. I joined Porridge Club this year, though I don't hate myself, so I had milk in mine rather than water. But porridge with your nuts, your honey, cinnamon, all that good stuff. Pretty basic. You don't want to leave yourself lacking come the race. So.
And if it was an afternoon hill climb, let's say at 2 o'clock, would you have anything before then as well? Something at around 12 maybe?
Yeah, just a normal lunch, to be honest, as long as there's nothing too rich that you're going to see on your bars at the top of the hill. But yeah, nothing too complicated. I think we'd all agree though that the biggest kind of pre-hill climb tradition is definitely nervous toilet breaks. It's unavoidable and something we reference in every single video, I think.
2 to 4 is a good estimate. And that's even the morning ones. But yeah, I think for me, porridge, I knew it worked. I didn't want to mess with it. And if it's an afternoon one, just a little snack about lunchtime, and definitely hungry by the time you finish. But then again, it's all about that power to weight ratio.
Just eat the normal food I'd eat throughout a normal day. during a hill climb, yeah, there's nothing too different. Just make sure I've not stuffed my face during lunch or anything, so I feel all bloated before I tear my guts out in a hill climb.
Come on, Reuben! Do you come?
We've also had a couple of questions about how you actually get into hill climbs. So Wayne Williams and James L have asked basically where you find out about them. So Joe, how did we find out about them?
Well, you go onto the CTT, Cycling Time Trials website, and they have a whole list of the hill climbs there. If you want to enter them, you have to be a member of a CTT registered club. So you guys are a member of the BikeRadar club, that's CTT registered. I'm a member of Bristol South Cycling Club, that's also CTT registered, and you just enter online. You can enter as many as you want, and then you just turn up and race.
There are some hill climbs, club ones that are entry on the line, but they're not generally advertised on CTT, so you look for those separately. But again, it's well worth doing, well worth getting into, because it's like proper grassroots cycling.
Yeah, I'd say as well, something that you should really be aware of, and a lot of people fall down with this, is, and myself included if Joe wasn't there to hassle me, but you need to usually register from about 2 weeks in advance. So you do have to have a bit of pre-planning, but normally, although it's getting more popular, you can normally get a place. And I'd also say that they cost like next to nothing. You know, yes, you are only racing for a short amount of time, but a lot of work goes into them, but you're rarely paying more than £10 really for a race, and you get nice food at the end. So it's really good value for money racing.
So despite hill climbs being very UK centric, we have had a Todge Sapio from the US asking, how long are these hill climbs? Because he wants to bring them to the US, which would be amazing. 2K or about 3 to 4 minutes long?
Yeah, that's about right. I'd say the longest one I see throughout the year is about 20 minutes, and that's a fairly kind of shallow one, and the shortest is around a minute. But they usually range from, I'd say, 2 minutes to 5 minutes. So yeah, that's the kind of the training you're looking at, is a 2 minute to 5 minute effort.
By far the most common question I think we get, and it's one that everybody asks, is why don't you wear a helmet when you're doing hill climbs? I'm gonna let these boys answer, because I don't want to touch that hot potato.
So basically, CTT, Cycling Time Trials, have a regulation that seniors don't have to wear a helmet. It's not mandatory, but if you're a junior, it is mandatory. These events aren't always on closed roads, but sometimes they are. So it's advised that the riders do wear them, but again, not mandatory. Because it's all about power to weight, you're knocking 200 to 300 grams off if you don't wear it, so most riders don't.
We had an awesome time throughout the season, and a few people have asked, will we be doing it next year?
I think so. Yeah, after Montauk, I was absolutely pumped for next year already. But yeah, it's just been really good fun. You meet a load of people, you race hard, you train hard, and what about you?
I think I will. I really will. I think my life will be less in flux next year, so I think provided I can commit more to it, I'd really like to give it a proper go.
I think if you trained properly, you'd be quite fast.
Maybe.
So that is the end of the Hill Climb Diaries series. As we already said, we all had an excellent time, didn't we? Met lots of nice people, it was brilliant, and we really want to keep the Diaries series going. We've got a few daft ideas of things we can do throughout the next few months, but we also want to hear from you guys what you'd like us to do.
On a personal level, I'd quite like to do some proper TTs. I've never actually ridden the TT bike, and I've actually got one up there. That was my dad's old one, so that would be quite fun. Definitely going to rope these two into it. What about you, Jack? What are your plans for next year?
For next year, do a bit more mountain bike racing. I really enjoy that. It's the only thing I'm half decent at. But I think more than anything, and those that know me, I love my tandem, and I'd love nothing more than to have these two out in that. So fingers crossed we do something stupid with that.
That idea has been kicking around for about 2 years.
Doesn't matter.
Before we go, just want to say a huge thanks to all the clubs and organisers that put on hill climb events. The volunteers, they're a huge part of it, and the partners that are dragged around the country to stand in cold countryside roads. And the comments from you guys, they've been quite entertaining. Just want to stress that this is a great form of racing, very accessible, so highly, highly recommended.
Yeah, and with those comments, we do look at them, we do read them, and we will be paying attention to them. So if you have some ideas for what you want us to do let us know, because we'll be paying attention, and hopefully some of your daft ideas will come to fruition and you'll see more of us soon.